Last time we saw the official start of the conflict, the taking of Pusan Castle, and the absolutely disastrous inaction of the Korean Navy. My name is Stefan, and this is Japan at War. Just one day after taking Pusan Castle and the fort at Taerepo, Konishi merged his two forces together and marched them to the fortress at Dongnae, just 10 kilometers to the northeast on the main road to Seoul. This was supposed to be the strongest fortification in the area. It was a high wall citadel on a hilltop in the front of Mount Kumjong. But by this time, it was practically bursting with 20,000 ill-equipped soldiers, untrained conscripts, and a large mass of scared civilians. In command was the prefect of Dongnae, 41-year-old Sanghyun. And what of Naval Commander Pak Hong? Well, while all this chaos was going on, he made his way out of the fortress. From what I can tell, fleeing to Ongyang and then to Gyeongju. As Konishi approached the fortress at 8 a.m. on the 25th of May, he did as he had done at Pusan and gave the defenders one last chance to surrender. They put up a large sign outside the fortification's south gate that read, "If you want to fight, we will fight, or lay down your weapons and let us pass." Sanghyun wrote a reply on a piece of wood and threw it over the wall at them. It read, "Fighting and dying are easy, but letting you pass, I cannot do." It seems obvious that Song knew that the situation was hopeless. After all, the defenders at Pusan hadn't been able to hold out at all. In an act of loyalty, a servant of his told him of a gap in the Japanese lines and begged him to leave before it was too late. But he refused to leave. Instead, he sat down to write a final letter to his father. "Our fortress is under siege, surrounded by a multitude of enemy soldiers. There is no chance of rescue. The other garrisons are sleeping peacefully, oblivious to the danger we face. It grieves me to leave you, but a subject's duty is to his king, and it must come before a son's devotion to his father." Now, according to Korean accounts, the Battle of Dongnae lasted 12 hours. Japanese accounts say it was over in 4. Whichever you want to believe is up to you. The besieged Koreans, women included, fought desperately, releasing arrows and throwing stones at the attacking Japanese. As Sanghyun beat the great drum in the upper pavilion of the castle to urge his soldiers to fight fiercely. But once again, the older style weapons of the Koreans just could not keep up with Japanese firelocks. Many of the Ashiguru simply stayed out of range of the Korean weapons, then formed lines, and then opened fire on the defenders. They did this over and over until resistance finally started to falter. Once it did, Konishi directed his men over with his sword to begin scaling the walls using their bamboo ladders. He then, sword still in hand, began scaling with them. Once over the top, they cut down the remaining wall defenders and then had the men rain down rifle fire on the remaining defenders. And then it was over. Song was actually captured alive by a group of soldiers. When they tried to force him to bow, though, he refused. They responded by slashing him with their swords. In total, the Japanese suffered around 100 dead, with 400 wounded in the Battle of Dongnae. The Korean deaths were substantially higher and numbered between 3,000 to 3,500, with another 500 taken as prisoner. After the battle, So Yoshitoshi, upon hearing of Sanghyun that he was among the dead, ordered a funeral be held and wrote an epitaph on his grave that read, a loyal subject. So was actually deeply saddened by this and had hoped to have the man spared. See, Song had treated So very well in the pre-war missions to Korea, and he did not think he deserved to die. His final letter actually did make its way north to his parents in 1594. Gyeongsang Right Navy Commander Won Gyun was approaching a state of panic at his base on Koje Island. The first reports he got of the appearance of the Japanese Navy were soon quickly followed by reports of the fall of Pusan, and then of what had happened at Dongnae. And then he heard of the desertion of Pak Hong. And with that, any thoughts that he had of fighting back had quickly disappeared. The only thing one could think about now was retreating to safer waters and hopefully join up with another naval force. And from what I can tell, it actually did start off as an orderly retreat, but he panicked when he saw a group of Korean fishing boats in the far distance and thought that they were scouts for the Japanese. And to prevent the Japanese from taking a hold of them, he had his ships sunk and all his weapons destroyed. Well, at least almost all of them. He was actually just about to abandon his own flagship and run when two of his subordinates reminded him of the consequences of desertion. They knew that desertion of this nature would most likely lead to his execution, and were able to convince him to stay and send for reinforcements from the Chola Left Navy commander, Yi Sun-shin. In the end, he did stay, but what good was he now? Most of his weapons his men had were destroyed, and his original fleet of around 100 or so ships was now reduced to just 4. Both fleets of the Gyeongsang Left and Right Navies were pretty much gone. 250 ships, a whole 2/3 of the entire Korean Navy, either abandoned or destroyed by their own commanders. And it does make you have to think, who was beating the Koreans more? Japan or Korea? Now that all that remained in the south to provide resistance at sea were the right and left navies of Chola province. A combined force of less than 100 ships. And that is where we will leave you. Just one day after the fall of Pusan, Dongnae had also fallen, officially establishing a beachhead for the rest of the invasion. And around 250 ships had been sunk or abandoned in a panic. How many more places would fall? Would this self-destruction continue? Find out on the next episode of Japan at War. And if you want to see just how deadly Japanese firelocks were and how many variations of them, we just posted up a special episode which will be available on the screen next. See you then.